I thought sending money would protect my family. For 7 years, I never asked questions. Then my grandchild said one sentence that exposed the truth I was never meant to discover. My daughter died 7 years ago. The house never forgave the silence. I was already wealthy then, but grief does not respect numbers. It strips you down until even money feels ashamed to exist. Her husband stood beside the grave, head bowed, hands shaking. I promised myself that my grandchild would never suffer. Every year, I sent $40,000, like clockwork, like penance. At the same time, my own empire was collapsing. Partners betrayed me. A boardroom vote erased my name. Overnight, I went from billionaire to broken. That was when she entered my life. She was not impressed by my past. She saw only the man, sleeping in his office, eating cold noodles, staring at failure. She said, "You are not finished. You are only stripped down to truth." She stayed when I had nothing to offer. She worked beside me. She challenged my ego. She taught me patience and the dignity of starting again. Brick by brick, we rebuilt. Long nights, bleeding pride, relentless discipline. Years later, success returned. Bigger, cleaner, earned. Then my grandchild visited. They sat close to me, small fingers clenched, eyes too old for their face. They whispered, "Grandpa, he told me not to tell you. He uses the money to hurt Mom's memory." My chest tightened, not with rage, with clarity, because at that moment, I understood something deeper than wealth. Money can save lives, but love, real love, must also know when to stop giving and start protecting. And as I looked at the woman who rebuilt my soul beside me, I realized the hardest decision of my life was about to begin. I did not speak right away. Silence can be heavier than anger. That night, I walked the city with her, the woman who never asked for my name. When I was nothing, streetlights hummed, cold air cut my lungs. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from truth arriving late. She listened. She always listened. Then she said quietly, "Love without wisdom becomes permission for harm." That sentence burned more than betrayal. I remembered every transfer, every excuse I made to avoid confrontation. I called it generosity. It was guilt. The next morning, I audited everything. Accounts, schools, doctors, lies stacked neatly, like polished stones. My success had returned. But this time, it felt different. I was not chasing revenge. I was choosing responsibility. She stood beside me as I froze the payments, as I redirected the money, as I built a trust only my grandchild could touch. I expected chaos. Instead, I felt peace. My businesses thrived again, not because of power, but because I led with boundaries, with truth, with the humility she taught me. One evening, my grandchild hugged me, harder than ever before. They said, "You look lighter now, Grandpa." I was, because success is not measured by how much you give, but by how wisely you protect what matters. And as I held their hand, I felt a question forming, one that would change all of our futures. The question refused to leave me. It followed me into meetings, into quiet dinners, into the early hours, when sleep avoids the honest. What kind of man had I become after all this success and all this loss? I watched my grandchild play, laughing without fear now, and I felt something unfamiliar, hope, mixed with accountability. She noticed it too, the woman who had seen me fall, who had seen me rebuild, without shortcuts. She said, "Your legacy is speaking. Are you listening?" That night, I opened an old box, photos of my daughter, her handwriting, a letter she wrote years before she died. It said, "Dad, if something happens to me, please teach my child how to be brave." My throat closed. I had been buying safety, not teaching strength. The next day, I made a decision that terrified me more than losing everything. I requested custody discussions, not out of revenge, out of duty. The room was tense. Eyes watched me carefully, judging the billionaire, expecting control. Instead, I spoke softly. I spoke as a father who failed once and refused to fail again. She squeezed my hand under the table, A silent reminder. This was not about money. This was about courage. As I left the room, my phone vibrated. A message from him. 3 words. Threatening. Desperate. In that moment, I understood. The hardest battle of my life was not behind me. It was about to begin. The message stayed on my screen, longer than it should have. I did not reply. Power once made me reckless. Loss made me careful. She taught me the difference. Weeks passed. Lawyers spoke. Files grew thicker. Truth surfaced slowly, like light through dirty water. My grandchild began calling me more. Small stories, school projects, questions about life. Each call healed something I never admitted was broken. At work, my companies reached new heights. Not because I demanded more, but because I finally listened. People followed clarity, not fear. One evening, as rain tapped the windows, she sat across from me, hands wrapped around warm tea. "You cannot save everyone," she said gently, "but you can stand where it matters." I nodded. The court date approached. Sleep grew lighter. Memories grew heavier. I dreamed of my daughter, not dying, smiling, as if she already knew. The night before everything changed, my grandchild asked to stay with me. They fell asleep on the couch, breathing steady, trust unguarded. I sat there in the dark, a man who had conquered markets, yet feared one simple truth. Real wealth is not money returned. It is love reclaimed. After you learn how to protect it. My phone buzzed again. Another message, longer this time. Confessional. And as I read the first line, my heart slowed, because I knew tomorrow would decide who we all became. The confession trembled in my hands. He admitted fear, debt, choices made too easily, then repeated until they became habit. There was no apology, only justification. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I felt pity without weakness. She stood behind me, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You can forgive," she said, "without surrendering your child's future." Morning arrived quietly. The courthouse smelled of paper and coffee, of lives paused between decisions. I wore no expensive suit, only calm. When I spoke, I did not mention numbers. I did not mention power. I spoke of bedtime stories, of missed birthdays, of a child who learned silence too early. My voice shook once. I let it. Across the room, he avoided my eyes. The judge listened. So did the room. Time stretched. Breath held. Then my grandchild looked at me and smiled. Small, brave. Something inside me broke open. Not grief, not anger, purpose. The ruling was not yet spoken, but I felt a shift. Like a tide turning, she squeezed my hand again. Steady, certain. Outside, sunlight touched the steps, as if forgiving the world. My phone vibrated once more. Not from him, from an unknown number. The message was short. It mentioned my daughter, a truth I had never heard, a detail that changed everything. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with awe, because just when I thought the story of our pain had reached its limit, it opened into something deeper. The message repeated her name, as if it were a door I had never opened. It spoke of a choice she made in her final months, a safeguard, a plan meant for failure, not death. My hands went cold. I showed it to her. She read slowly, then looked up. Eyes steady. "She trusted you," she said, "even when you doubted yourself." That night, I returned home with my grandchild. The house felt different, lighter, as if it had been waiting for truth to arrive. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured warm milk. They traced shapes in the glass. "Grandpa," they asked, "will everything be okay now?" I wanted to promise. Instead, I told the truth. "We're going to try very hard to make it right." They smiled anyway. Later, after sleep claimed the house, I opened the old letter again. My daughter's handwriting, curved with hope, not fear. I realized then that success had never been about returning to the top. It was about becoming the man she believed I already was. The woman beside me knew it too. She said nothing. She did not need to, because the next step was clear. A meeting I had postponed, a document I had never signed, a future waiting For one final act of courage, I closed the folder, heart steady, mind certain. Tomorrow, everything would move forward, and somewhere between justice and love, between loss and purpose, the true meaning of wealth was about to reveal itself. Morning arrived without noise, as if the world respected what was at stake. I dressed slowly, not for court, not for business, for truth. She watched me from the doorway, the woman who had seen every version of my fear. "You do not need armor today," she said, "only honesty." The meeting room was small, too small for the weight I carried inside. Papers waited on the table. Names, dates, my daughter's handwriting, copied into legal language. The safeguard she created was not money. It was custody, conditional, activated only if trust was broken. She had seen it coming. My chest tightened, not with regret, but with respect. She had believed I would wake up in time. I signed nothing yet. Outside, my grandchild was drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. Bright colors, messy lines, freedom. They looked up and waved. That single gesture was worth more than every company I had ever owned. Inside, the conversation shifted. Questions softened. Resistance weakened. The truth had gravity. She stood beside me, not speaking, yet anchoring every word. I chose carefully. I realized then that betrayal had not destroyed me. It had refined me. As the final document slid closer across the table, my hand hovered above it. This signature would change everything. Not just custody, not just legacy, but the kind of man my grandchild would grow up watching. I inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of love, of loss, of the future pressing forward. And just before I picked up the pen, someone spoke a name I had not heard in years. The name cut through the room, like a memory refusing burial. It was hers, my daughter's, spoken by a woman, standing near the door, a social worker, young, nervous, holding a folder thicker than my regrets. She said, "She asked me to wait until you were ready." The room blurred. Inside the folder were recordings, voicemails, notes written late at night. My daughter's voice, calm, certain. She spoke of love, but also of fear, of patterns she noticed, of a man who smiled publicly and controlled quietly. She never asked me to punish. She asked me to protect. My grandchild's laughter floated in from outside, unaware of how close their life stood to changing forever. She reached for my hand, the woman who rebuilt me. Her grip was firm. "This is not about winning," she whispered. "This is about becoming." I nodded. I stood, slowly, deliberately. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I spoke as a father who finally listened, as a grandfather who chose courage over comfort. The room leaned in. Across the table, his mask cracked. Just for a second. Enough. The pen waited. My hand no longer trembled. Outside, chalk drawings faded under footsteps, but the child who drew them was about to step into a safer world. As I reached forward, the weight of 7 years pressed into a single moment, and just as the pen touched paper, my phone vibrated again. One final message. This one was not a threat. It was a confession. That changed the stakes entirely. The confession arrived without anger, without defense. It was written by him, but not for himself. He admitted control, neglect, a resentment he hid behind grief. He admitted that my daughter had tried to leave, quietly, safely. My breath caught. He wrote that she planned everything, because she knew what fear can do to a child. I felt shame rise, then settle into resolve. I looked at the woman beside me. She did not speak. Her eyes said enough. I stepped forward. "I accept responsibility," I said, "for what I ignored, for what I enabled." The room shifted again, not toward pity, toward truth. I signed. The pen moved easily now, as if it had been waiting for the right reason. Outside, my grandchild ran to me, chalk dust on their hands, eyes bright. "Are we going home?" they asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. Later, as dusk settled, we sat together on the porch. She rested her head on my shoulder. Not because she needed support, because she trusted what came next. I watched the child sleep, safe in a place, built on honesty. I thought about wealth, about success, about all the years. I believed strength meant endurance. I finally understood. Strength means choosing differently. When you learn the truth. And as night deepened, a quiet certainty filled me. This was not the end of the story. It was the moment where everything meaningful was finally about to begin. The certainty did not bring rest. It brought responsibility. Days unfolded carefully, schedules rewritten, rooms rearranged, a child learning what consistency feels like. At night, when the house settled, she and I spoke in whispers about fear, about forgiveness, about how love matures when it is tested. She reminded me that rebuilding a life is quieter than building an empire. No applause, only presence. My grandchild began to ask questions, not about money, about my daughter, what she laughed at, what scared her, how she loved. I answered slowly, choosing honesty over protection. At work, I stepped back, delegated, trusted. For the first time, success did not demand my absence. One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, unexpected. It was from him, not defensive, not angry. He asked for a meeting. No lawyers, no conditions. She read it with me. "This is dangerous," she said, "but growth often is." I agreed. The meeting was set for a public place. Daylight, witnesses. I arrived early, watched people pass. Ordinary lives, ordinary courage. When he walked in, he looked smaller, older, human. He sat across from me, hands open, eyes tired. "I want to change," he said. "Not for money, not for custody, for the child." My heart tightened, not with trust, with caution shaped by wisdom, because forgiveness does not erase accountability. And as I prepared to speak, as I weighed mercy against safety, my phone vibrated softly. A message from my grandchild's school. Short, urgent. My breath stilled, because the next choice I made would define what kind of future we were truly building. The message from the school was a misunderstanding, a small fall, a scraped knee, nothing more. But it shook me, because fear never truly leaves you. It waits to remind you what matters. I met him anyway, not to punish, not to rescue, but to draw a line, clear enough that no child would ever stand confused again. I told him forgiveness was possible, access was possible, trust would be earned, slowly, under light, with accountability. He cried, not dramatically, quietly, the way people cry when excuses finally run out. I stood up first. I did not feel victorious. I felt finished with being blind. Life settled into a new rhythm. My grandchild laughed louder, slept deeper, stopped flinching at footsteps. The woman who walked beside me never claimed credit. She never asked for gratitude. She simply stayed. Years later, the company's people admired were no longer my proudest achievement. It was a kitchen table where homework happened, a calendar filled with school plays, a child who knew that love does not disappear when truth is spoken. I learned this too late for my daughter. That regret will never soften, but it shaped me. Here's the truth I leave you with. Money can delay pain. It cannot heal it. Silence can feel kind. It is often cruel. Love without courage becomes neglect. And success, real success, is not measured by what you build. When everything is easy, it is measured by what you protect. When the truth hurts, and walking away would be simpler. I lost my daughter. That wound remains. But because I chose to listen, to stop hiding behind generosity, to let wisdom guide love, I did not lose my grandchild. And that is the only fortune that ever truly mattered. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to Twisting Stories, and stay with us for stories that remind us what truly matters.